Hey, thanks guys for joining us today. It is a rainy day in Las Vegas, so it's always a little hard to get moving and going, and especially because it's a Tuesday after a Monday holiday. I appreciate y'all being here. I appreciate all that you do. Our question today was, what were your plans for spring break? Because I know you're already thinking about it. So those of you that are rolling in now, if you'd like to go ahead and throw up into chat, what are your plans for spring break? That was our inquiring minds question. It's so good to see so many familiar names and faces with us today. As you know, my name is Kim Loomis. I used to be the director for online and blended learning here in Las Vegas, Nevada, Clark County School District. I taught high school math for 10 years before becoming a teacher facilitator, working with the RPDP, becoming a building administrator, eventually going into professional development. And I did actually teach an online math class with students. And when I saw that, I thought, if we can do online math with students, we can do online professional development. And look, I'm still doing it because what they say is once you retire, you get to follow your passion. So all of you guys throwing all these great things up in chat for spring break. Imagine I could be doing that all the time, but I love what I do. I have such a passion for online and blended learning that even though I retired in 2019, I keep doing it because I love being here with you guys. Thank you so much for allowing me to lead this session. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Portrait of Nevada Learner, really spend some time on reflective practice and thinking about how data is a part of our reflective practice and how we can use data to create student ownership. And those of you that like to get more than the 1 hour workshop that we have today, our introduction, if you want to do the 5 hour Canvas extended workshop, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But really, you guys are already doing this, so why not go ahead and do that 5 hour Canvas extended workshop? So up in chat, Diane says that she's going to be setting up a new house. Good for you during winter or spring break. All right. Most of you I know have been with me. So let me ask you this. How many of you have seen the Portrait of a Nevada Learner? Nope, never seen it before, just recently and months ago. So up in chat. Yep. Yep, just recently. Good. Good. All right. So this isn't gonna, months ago we got a lot of yeses. Good. That's good. Yeah, it's relatively new because when we talk about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, we only adopted it as a state in May of 2023. So when you think about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, if you heard about it months ago and maybe here with me and one of our webinars or maybe in your building, it hasn't been out very long. And so our goal is to try to get it out and let you guys know, one, about it, and two, how to bring it into your classroom. Now, this wasn't done with a bunch of teachers in a room. Nope. This was done as a collaborative in our whole state. We got stakeholders from across the state and community building, parents, students, all together to try to figure out what is it that we want our students to be and do when they grow up and what comes out of education. And so that's how that Portrait of a Learner came about. Now you'll hear me say PNL because that's just my abbreviation for Portrait of a Nevada Learner. So if you hear that and you see it in your Canvas course, that's just an abbreviation for it. So actually they started way back in 2022, even before that. But I remember in October of 2022 meeting in a large group. There were over 150 of us together in one of the downtown hotels. And we, started, what does it look like? What do you think it should be? And, they did all these great webinars thinking through what it should be. And then in May of 2023, they pulled it all together. So what it really says is, look, we want to know that the academics are important. They are definitely important, but what we also want to do is we want to move in and get some of those skills. So it's a blend of the academics as well as the skills. And I'm going to go ahead and put up in chat the link to the PDF on the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. So what we want to start thinking about is how in our academics, in our math class or in our science class or in our fine arts class or an elective course, how can we pull out or how can we allow kids to practice some of those skills that are going to be important for the rest of their lives, like emotional intelligence, flexibility, leadership skills, the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, grit, or what we like to say, resilience. So when we created the portrait, what we tried to do is make it very simple in that we said, okay, there's 4 areas. As a learner, I might ask myself, how will I grow in my learning? And I could be 6, I could be 16, but how am I going to grow in my learning? And how am I going to keep that growing going on? And that's what we call empowerment. And So the second one there is connect relationships, not only among peers, but with adults, and thinking through how do I build and sustain relationships and within my community, impacting on the environment and how will I thrive. So when you look at the PDF there, it's just a one-page document, you'll see these 3 or 4 categories: empowering, which talks about reflecting and critical thinking and self-care and balance; connecting, those are our 4 C's, and empathy and respect; impacting, how we can be purposeful and how we can have civic engineering and being critical thinkers; and thriving, being resilient, courageous, and having some agility and integrity in our work. So tonight what I want to do is I want to look at one area in particular. I want to look at that first area. I want to look at empowering, because I think empowering kind of really gets to the data part. Because when you think about a student, and if in their head, I used to always say in their internal voices, they're asking themselves, how will I grow in my learning? Well, they need to be reflecting on their personal strengths, or they also need to be thinking about how they learn. That's why I love the session we did on the learner profile, and having them think about the approaches that they take to learning. Do they like hands-on? Do they like visual? How can they lead with curiosity? But when it comes to data, this is where they need to be really self-aware about their needs and being an advocate in their areas. If they know their data, and some of us are already using digital content, and are we asking kids to monitor their own data, monitor what's going on in their learning, so that they can say, oh, you know what, I was absent 3 days last week, no wonder I don't understand. How can I help myself? Ask for more support and be more of an emotional well-being, instead of just shutting down and doing learned helplessness. So this empowering part, I think, really, really pleads right into using data, not just us using data, but also having our students use data. So that's what tonight's first breakout is going to be about. First breakout tonight is thinking about, when you look at that empowering, if we go back to the empowering, and you can look at it from the PDF that I put there in the chat, when you look at it, what kind of strategies come in mind that help with student empowerment and helping them understand that they are the owners of their own learning? So let's go ahead and do some breakout rooms. We're going to be back in about 5 minutes. Welcome back. Welcome back. Like I said, if something came up in your room and you want to share it in the chat, I'd love it. We got Joyce up here saying self-checks for understanding, making corrections on the materials. Lisa chimed in with some choice and also creating rubrics. Love it. Their own data and metacognition. That's exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. I love it. You guys rock. All right, so let me talk a little bit about data as a reflective practice, because that's what you talked about here via metacognition, because we really want to think of data as more of as a way to reflect on our practice, and not only our practice, but also for students to reflect on, or empower them to reflect on their learning. So thinking about data, not just as number crunching or analytics, but how does it really empower our students? So up in chat, when you think about data-informed decision making, again, when you think about data-informed decision making, and you've probably heard that your entire career, and I know some of you have been around 20 plus years because I see it on your surveys, what comes to mind? What comes to mind when you think about data-informed decision making? What comes to mind? Differentiation, small groups, formative assessment, data-driven instruction. Good, good. Got some good stuff coming up. Differentiation, good. Length of teaching. What do I need to reteach? Oh, good. Yeah. Depth of knowledge. Good stuff. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. What comes next? Important time. It is important. Yes. And it is time consuming. And today, Kathy, we're really going to talk about how to use that time wisely. Because I got to tell you, you guys, you heard me say that I was in the math classroom for 10 years. So you would think I'd be like a data freak. And I am totally a data freak. I love numbers. I love looking for patterns. I love analyzing, but sometimes it's just too much. So yes, can be time consuming. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to share with you a 3-step process. So when we think about data, I like to think about critical reflection. And I know oftentimes people think about critical reflection in a different way, but really when you think about data, I want us to think about the what, the so what, and the now what. So when we're looking at data, what is it saying? So what should I do now? and where am I going to go next? So let's go ahead and I'm going to stop this screen share and we're going to go over and watch like a 2-minute quick video on data.
What is critical reflection? We reflect all the time. Anytime we think back on something that happened and imagine how we might do it differently next time. Critical reflection is similar, but involves a more formal process. It requires carefully considering how events and experiences have led to personal growth and how we might think or act differently in the future as a result. A critical reflection is not simply a summary of what happened or a report of how you felt during an experience. For a reflection to be critical, you must make connections between what happened, what you learned from that experience, and how you will apply that learning in the future. Your reflection doesn't have to be about a positive or successful experience. We often learn the most when things don't go right. The key is to choose an experience where you learn something important that has changed your beliefs or actions in some way. If you have been asked to relate your experience to specific concepts, make sure you choose an experience that you can relate to those concepts. One model for critical reflection is a 3-stage process known as what, so what, now what, developed by Terry Borden. Let's walk through the 3 stages together. Stage 1. What? What happened in a particular situation? Replay the event in your mind as though it were happening in front of you on a movie screen. What do you see? Be as objective as possible. Try not to attach any judgments at this stage. Stage 2. So what? Analyze the experience more deeply. What was important about the situation for you? How does this experience connect to course concepts? What did you learn? Stage 3. Now what? This stage is about applying what you've learned. How have you changed or grown because of this experience? How will you think or act differently in future situations because of this experience? What are you going to do next? Remember, whatever you are reflecting.
All right, I'm going to stop us there and just I want to come back to the what, so what, and now what. Oftentimes, when we think about this, we think about what does it look like when we're working with students and we're looking at data. What is the data telling us? And in this particular reflection, we want to say we don't look at it as positive or negative, but we just want to know what is it saying? And after we've analyzed what it says, so what are we going to do about it? And then the now what is that action step that we're going to take. Now, I want to think about this as, is it taking us to personal growth, right? I want you to think about, notice there in the blue text there, it says how these experiences lead to personal growth. For us as teachers, to reflect on our practice, but also on our students to reflect on their learning. So if we can help our students to look at their data as well and ask what, so what, and now what, then we can also help them be empowered like the NPL asks us to do, to make sure that students know that they have choices. They don't just have to sit back and say, oh, I failed that test. Well, now what are we going to do about it? And what are we going to do the next time we're about it? So I got a question for you. We talked a lot about data and we're talking about the what, the so what, and the what, but I want you to think about data and I want to demystify this. Up in chat, I'd like you to throw up how many decisions you think you make on a typical day. How many decisions you make on a typical day. I remember when I was in the classroom, I used to come home and I have 2 daughters and they would be like, Mom, what's for dinner? And I'm like, dude, I am so tired of making decisions. I don't want to make decisions anymore. Right. Thousands of decisions, billions, Googleplex. Yeah. We make so many decisions. We get to a point where it's like, I'm done making decisions. I saw what you guys were going to do on spring break. You're going to relax. You're not going to make any decisions, right? Sit on a beach, right? We do. We make way too many decisions because we have way too many data points to actually transcribe and analyze. Found this in a Psychology Today article. It says that we make about 35,000 decisions daily. 35,000 decisions daily. And you know that over 200 of those are just on food alone. Like, what am I going to have for breakfast? What do I want to drink? Do I want to drink? Am I hungry? You know, I can just, when you think about all of these datas that we're doing every day and we're analyzing and trying to make those decisions every day, it becomes overwhelming. And so you're going to hear me really say, find the data that's important. Not every piece of data is important, but find the data that is important. For example, today's a prime example because here in Vegas, the weather was crappy, right? So when you get up in the morning, you think, okay, I got to determine what I'm going to wear. Well, the first thing, if I determine what I'm wearing, I'm going to ask myself, am I going inside? Am I going to stay inside, or am I going to be outside? And if I'm going to be outside, am I going to be active? And today's, I better have something that, can get wet. Or if I'm going to be passive, where I can just sit out on my back patio, I'm still covered from the rain, but different type of wearing, right? And if I'm going to be indoors, do I need to wear business, or can I wear my sweats? I'm going to be behind a Zoom. I could have sweats on down below. I don't, by the way, I have a pair of jeans on. But you can see how many decisions we can make in our decision tree just on what to wear. So when we look at instructional data, this is where it becomes really important to think about what data is the important data, because we have biographical data, we have behavioral data, observational data. You get your warm-ups, you have the kids go through those. They might have taken a survey, their exit tickets, quizzes, tests, even the big data like MAPS tests or NWEA. Those are all big data. So we have to think of it, if it's such a broad range, what becomes important if we're overwhelmed? Right? If we're overwhelmed. So we need to look at data and ask ourselves, what? So what? And now what? So when you're looking at data, and I don't care if it's small, exit quiz data, or if you're looking at the test at the end of the unit, or if you're looking at the big benchmark data, ask yourself those three questions. What? So what? Now what? Because once we get data, it becomes important for us to figure out what comes next in instruction. I can't change what happened Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday if today is Thursday, but I need to know about what do I need to do next. So it becomes important when you're looking at data, not just analyzing. Yes, I can analyze and say, oh, I didn't teach that very well, or that resource that we used really didn't help the kids. But I need to think about what comes next in data, because once we collect it and we analyze it, we have to make instructional decisions about next, because we can't fix the past. So then we plan and we reflect on that. Now, sometimes the data comes in the formative way, which I love formative data. And if you're going to practice some formative data tomorrow, next week, or guys, do the Canvas course, get those 5 additional hours, because I know you're already doing this, right? So think about, how am I using that data to determine what comes next? So if I did a warm up in my classroom, what comes next? Well, hopefully the instruction comes next, but am I going to change the instruction because of the what data I got? And how about if it's an exit ticket? If it's an exit ticket, am I going to change the instruction tomorrow because of the information that I got on that exit ticket? So those, you want to think about data informed decision making, is making decision on what comes next. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about what comes next. The now what, the now what. So here's an example. I only put in 9 data points. This is like a 50-minute math period, right? In Kim Loomis's math class. There's tons of data that's coming in. Who came to class? What demeanors they're in? I might have a warm up. I'm checking to see who's on task. Is there conversations going on in the classroom? Keeping track of the engagement, making sure kids are completing their assignments. Did anybody master their assignments? And then I've got an exit ticket. So there's like 9 pieces of data going on just in this. And I know there's even more going on truly in that area. But what I want to really look for is, I want to look for the data that's going to make a difference in performance. So when I do that and I start looking at the difference that's going to make a difference in performance, I look at the warm up. That warm up, just like I said 2 minutes ago, warm up data helps me to inform what's going to come next in today's classroom. For an example, we used to have warm-ups that had a couple of problems that were similar to last night's homework. And in the warm-up data, if the kids were doing okay, then I knew that I could move forward. But if the warm-up data was poor, I knew that we needed to do some reteaching. So it helped me figure out what was going to change today with that warm-up. Now, the conversations I have as I'm walking around the room and the kids and seeing if they're on task and seeing that they're doing their work and stuff, that's data that can inform in the moment. I have a prime example. I love this. I was in a teacher's classroom And this was back in Boston. And in Boston, she came in and she did a warm up. And in that warm up, she had like 5 questions on a Google survey. And when those kids answered those questions, she had a rubric in her head, and she can say, oh, you got all, you missed 1 and 2, I need you to sit here with me, we're going to start today, you're going to start this station. The kids, there was another station where the kids were going to be working on some digital software. There was another station for, I'm assuming it's the kids that did really well on the 5 questions because they were starting on a project. So it was really interesting how she used her warm-up data to sort kids for that day, for the now what in the immediate. And then by having conversations, she can then make the decision with the group that was with her and lead them out to where they need to go into the small stations that she already had. Now, when you're thinking about data that's going to drive tomorrow, that's going to see if students are mastering their assignments. So you might have an exit ticket, and that exit ticket's going to help you with saying, okay, kids either understood this concept, they didn't understand this concept, I need to reteach it, we can move forward. But that is data that's going to help us inform tomorrow. And that becomes really in performance when we look at that performance data. It's the now what. It's the now what that we need to look at. Now, I'm going to give you a little hint. The other day, I was doing this huge survey for a school district in California, and it was just a Google survey. And you know what? It had a lot of different data. And guess what? Artificial intelligence. Love it. Absolutely love it. I threw the data up in there and I said, what would you suggest? So I gave it some of the data. We had a bunch of data points on how these teachers were using technology in the classroom, and artificial intelligence helped me with making some decisions. Heck, if it can help me make some decisions on how to move forward, it can help you as well. So I'm going to ask you, has anybody used artificial intelligence to help analyze data? Now, you want to keep that personal information out. You don't want them to tell it's Susie or Johnny or whatever, but you can take the cohesive summary of data, drop it into AI and ask it, what would you do next? I love it. It's a great thought partner. Now, we want to be careful about attendance, demeanor, on task, engagement, and completion of assignment, because those are behavioral data. And behavioral data doesn't tell me about performance. What it tells me is that the students may not have engaged, so I have a poor performance, or the students may not have attended, but I have poor performance, but it doesn't tell me if they have any understanding or not. So you want to be careful about the difference between behavioral data and performance data. And as we move forward, you'll hear me talk more about that today. All right, so up in chat, how often are you collecting and reviewing individual performance data? Is it multiple times a day? Is it every other day? Is it at least once daily or once weekly? Now, when I say individual data, I mean, you could say Johnny's doing this, Susie's doing this, Sam's doing this constantly. I love it, Lisa. Yes. Others? Good, good. Love it. At least twice a week with quizzes. Good. Yeah. And when I say individual data, I want to be able to tie that data to that student. And that becomes really important because we can do the thumbs up and we can do the thumb sideways. That's kind of like a class average. I want to know about individual data. How is Johnny doing? How is Susie doing? Right? Love it, guys. A lot of multiple times a day, all the time. Yeah, we want to be careful about the difference between performance data, right? Data about instruction, about math, science, social studies, English, versus behavioral data. Did they show up? Did they engage? Right? So be careful about those types of data when you're talking about working with students, and especially when you're having kids track. And I'm okay with having kids track attendance because that is eye-opening sometimes. When kids don't even know their own attendance, that is so eye-opening when they realize that they're missing at least one day a week. And then they wonder why they're not doing well in my classroom. Not because they're not learning, because they're not there to learn. So that becomes really important too. I used to have on my learner profiles that I'd have the kids do. And I talk a lot about learner profiles because that was a class that we did in the fall. So you can go back and look at that recording. But having the kids not only track their grades every quarter, but also track their attendance every quarter so that they can see that there's a correlation between those two. All right, so let's talk about using data to inform. Now, you know that I believe that blended personalized learning is the wisdom of the teachers, because you guys are never going to go away. I would never take a teacher out of the classroom. You are the heart of the classroom. That's why kids come to school. They want relationships with you and their peers. But the cool thing is we have this technology that's very adaptable, and it could really target individual data points. If I have a third grade class, but I have kids in my class that are reading at the sixth grade level and some that are just barely reading at all in the first grade level, I can use technology that has that adaptability to work with them. So we can take the wisdom of the teacher plus the adaptability of the technology so that we can create that personalized learning space for each and every individual student. And that's the power of blended, when we can match those. Remember, we've talked about in the past the one third, one third, one third, one third digital curriculum, math, science, social studies, English, one third of the time students peer-to-peer active engagement, which may include tools where they're actively creating a project or a podcast or a video, and a third of the time where we're really guiding that instruction. And it can be Socratic seminars, small groups, it could even be using a playlist or a choice board. But that one third, one third, one third, using our tech, our teacher, and our student. And I like to call this the CIA of blended, just with some qualifiers: digital curriculum, guided instruction, authentic assessment. And in that triple Venn diagram you see there on the right, we're shooting right for the middle. A third, a third, a third. Not every lesson, not every day, but over a week or a unit of study, trying to have this balance with digital curriculum, guided instruction, and authentic assessment. I like to talk about DOK, so you're going to hear me say DOK, or Webb's depth of knowledge. When I say load numbers 1 and 2, which I truly believe we can give away to digital curriculum, then you're talking about the very bottom of the Bloom's taxonomy. Because my goal is for you as classroom teachers to get our kids to that extended and strategic thinking. If we're spending way too much of our time down in DOK 1 and 2 or remembering and understanding, we're never going to get the kids to that one third of authentic assessment, where they're creating and evaluating and synthesizing and justifying and taking a stand and drawing conclusions, if we're always stuck down in DOK level 1 and 2. And the cool thing about the one third, one third, one third, and we've talked about this before, is 2/3 of the time you get to do that teaching by walking around. And imagine the data you get to collect in those conversations. So today, when we talk about the DOK 1 and 2 from our digital curriculum, they're going to give us some quality data. Now, I've seen some of these platforms, iReady, Dreambox, Apex, all of them, they have too much data. So it becomes really important for us to pick 3 to 5 things off of there that's important for me to track. Not only important for me to track, but also for my students to track. Even if they're tracking one thing out of there, we need them to track how many lessons they've completed. We need them to track how many minutes they've done on there. If they can track one thing, how much empowerment are we giving them, right? So that's important when we think about the data, that not only that we can use, but the data that we can empower our students with, so that they can track it and we can push them to higher order thinking. So today's focus is really about DOK level 1 and 2, and getting our students to understand that they too can be empowered by tracking that data. So when you think about your softwares, right, your partners, your digital partners out there, and think about it, it's oftentimes set up in a place where they're set up by student learning objectives, or what I would call mastery-based learning, or SLOs, right? So when you think about, they're a single individual unit, and did the kids master it? Were they below? Were they near? Are they mastered? Did they exceed it? Oftentimes those come in green, yellows, and blues, or green, yellows, and reds, so that you can look through those. And when you see those dashboards, it gives you a pretty good overall feel for your students, but it also gives you a good idea for your data to figure out how to do small groups, or figure out who can move on to projects. So when you create your choice boards or your playlist, then it can help you differentiate, because you've already looked at some of the data and the mastery levels that those students are at. Now, again, I'm going to caution you on the difference between performance, or what we call achievement data. Did they master a subject area? Now, if they were absent, that's an activity or behavior. I don't know anything about their performance or achievement in that standard. If I've never not taught it, but if I've never assessed the students or collected data on their performance or achievement because they were absent, or because they were being, disruptive in the classroom and I had to send them out, whatever the case, I really don't know what their performance or achievement data is. So be really cautious about when you're looking at students' data, and when you're asking kids to monitor their data, we want to really look at that performance data. Are you achieving in math? Are you achieving? And a prime example is like your multiplication facts in third grade. Do you know your ones, twos, threes, fours? They can track it. Do I know all the way up to my 12s? They can track that data and have those kids do some data books and help them understand. If we also have them track, okay, how many times were you absent this week? Or, how many times did you have to put your name on the board? I don't know what you guys are doing for those behavior type things, but what you want to start thinking about, where can you get data? Now, right smack in the middle of these images is that learner profile, because I'm a big fan of learner profiles, because that's a definite way to get kids empowered. That is a definite way for kids to understand that they have responsibility in their learning. But we also want to start having them track their NWAs or their MAP scores, right? But those are so far between, and it takes oftentimes a long time before we get the data, and it just seems so cumbersome for students. Now, I get, for us as adults, we definitely want to look at it and see where we need to be, but we want to look at the individual data instead of the group average. We want to make sure that we're looking at IEPs and 504s and common assessments in our grade levels so that we have some site-based data, but we really want to get down to that individual data, that mastery data on the individual student. Now, there are times where you can do checks for understandings and you can do the observations and the conversations. They definitely work. I'm a big fan of, like, even I love over here, I put the Jamboard, because I loved using Jamboard. Now I have to use the Fig, what do they call it, Fig Jam. So I'm still learning that one, but those are great ways to get anonymous data that just says, do you understand this? So thinking through, is there times where I just need anonymous data, thumbs up, thumbs down, those types of things, that's a whole group? Or do I really need individual data on Billy and Susie and Sam? So think through, when is the data okay to have whole group, and when is it important, those essential standards, to have individual data? So think through, when's the best way to get those data sources. Now, I love this because this is, to me, not only do I love Legos, but it tells a story. Every piece of data that you collect truly tells a story. It does. Now, if we just collect the data, it's like all those Legos there at the top. Well, it's just a bunch of collected data. It's just a bunch of little data points. But then we can sort the data. And that gives us another story. But when we then start arranging the data, we get a better story. You want to get a clearer story, then we can represent it in a graphic, in some type of presented visually. But what we really want to get to is, we really want to get to where that data explains the story, where I can actually sit back and I can say, well, this data tells me that a third of my class is not understanding it. 2/3 of my class are understanding it. So what now am I going to do? If I've got a third that does it and 2/3 that do I continue moving forward because that's the vast majority of my students? How do I support the 1/3 that doesn't? So what we want to do is, we want to get that data into a form that is useful and actionable. If 2/3 of my students can get it and they can move forward, that's a great time to use digital content and let them move forward. And the third that aren't understanding is to look at some interventions and ways that we can work with these. And because digital curriculum allows for students to pick up where they left off, that's a great place to really come back to and be able to help students with that. Now, I use the what, so what, and the now what, but there's another way you can think of it. They call it the AAA process. Again, it's still that critical reflective practice. What? What can we ask of the data that we've collected? Go back to all those Lego blocks. All they're sitting there, they're all just sitting there. Can I arrange them? What can I ask? I might be asking, who understands this? I might be asking, who needs extra help? I might be asking, you know, who do I need to work with one-on-one? So think about the data and think about the questions that you can ask. And then you want to go to step 2, which is the so what. So now I've got all this data. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to look for patterns. I'm going to analyze it, right? I'm going to sort it. I'm going to think through it and figure out, what's the best way to move forward. So I'm looking for the patterns in the data and thinking, okay, so what do I do now? And that's step 3. That's the act, the now what. What are the steps I'm going to take on the next instruction, on the next 10 minutes, on tomorrow's lesson? It's that now what. What actions do I need to take? Do I need to take small groups? Do I need to reteach? Can we move forward? Sometimes, you would take and you would do your warm up and the kids all get it. And you're like, cool, great, everybody gets it. and change lesson because we're going to move right on because most everybody understood it. So I love taking data at the beginning and data at the end. So here's a data process. You probably have seen this before. This comes from Nearpod. Here, right? 24 kids. They're going to do some a little bit of data. I notice here the first thing I notice is only 95% of the students did the work. And I'm like, wait, first question I'm going to ask is, what's this data telling me? What can I determine from this set? What does it reveal about the students? Well, first thing, the so what is, dude, who missed the class? If I have 24 in my class, 94 did it. So that means somebody didn't participate. Why didn't they participate? Why didn't they move on? And then if you look at the quiz questions there, only 66% of the time were they correct answers. So should I pull small groups? Should I do peer to peer? Should I conduct one-on-one tutoring? Maybe I need to stop and do some reteaching because 66 isn't a very good. So these are those critical questions that we need to be asking ourselves. But also, an individual student should be asking themselves the same thing. What did I misunderstand? What did I understand? What can I do to improve my score? What do I need to move forward? Do I need reteaching? Should I come to the teacher on after school? Should I be watching a video? So asking our students to take that empowerment so they know how to act on their data as well. So when we have that data, we can then extend the learning. We can set up small groups. We can take a kid who's mastered something and pair them up with somebody who hasn't mastered something yet, right? So thinking about how we can extend that learning. Once we have the data, then we can do it. Now, again, guys, I'm a big fan of not having all the data. 35,000 data points is way too many. So what are the 2 or 3 data points that you want to track on a daily basis? Ask yourself that. What becomes really important when you're looking at iReady or you're looking at Edmentum and ExactPath? What's the data? What's the 2 or 3 points that are really important, not only for you, but for your students to track and be empowered on? Think through what that becomes important because that will help you make data informed instruction, right? Tells me, well, hey, maybe we should do some large group. Maybe we should do some small group. Maybe I need to go back and reteach or scalpel some of this learning. Maybe I need to stretch the learning. Maybe we're ready to already move into that higher order thinking in DOK level 3 and 4, or the higher areas of Bloom's taxonomy with projects. Or maybe I can do, like I said a moment ago, take somebody who's at a low level and pair them up with somebody who's at a smaller level and have them do peer-to-peer mentoring or peer-to-peer teaching. So thinking through what that looks like when you're using your data. Now, again, I know you guys are already doing this. I know you're already doing it. This is really just kind of like a refresher course, which the cool thing about it is if you're doing it, if you write it up, then you can get your 5 hours of extra professional development credit in the Canvas course. So when you're thinking about data, this is what becomes important about the P&L is you want to move it so that the students are taking ownership. So the students are goal setting so that the students can sit down with you and have a one-on-one conference. Because I will tell you, when we think about working with students, we want to think about the relationship we have with students. And yes, they're more than numbers, but if you know their numbers, you're going to see their eyes just widen. They're like, oh, you knew that? Because half the time kids don't even know what we know behind the scenes, right? But if we could tell them something that they didn't think that we knew and they already knew it because they've been empowered and they've been tracking their own data, those conversations are going to be so much more enhanced. And when you're thinking about enhancing the learning, think about when do I need to have that student to teacher one-on-one time or small group like you see here in the picture, or when can I do students to students and pair them up and have them work together? Or when should, in case, I look at the data and I'm like, oh, this kid needs a little bit of reteaching. I don't have the time to do the reteaching because we're in a situation where we can do teaching by walking around. How about I give them a Khan Academy video? Or how about I give them an extra worksheet that they can work on with their peers? Thinking about different ways you can use that data to improve student learning and having them track it becomes really important. And that's where I'm a big fan of that formative every day, looking for at least one data point that I can get from a kid and I can give them a high five as they walk out. Hey, cool. I love that you did really well on today's warm up. I love that you did really good on the exit ticket. I don't want to wait till the summative. If I wait till the end of the week and I'm looking at summative data and it's poor, I'm in trouble because I can't go back and redo Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I have to rethink what's going to happen on Monday. And you and I know what benchmarks look like. They tell you, move forward. So we have to make sure that we're collecting data on a daily basis so that we can get that moving forward. And like I said a moment ago, relationships are so key. When you know the student's data and you can talk to students about their data, where they own it and you own it, holy smokes, the relationship level just skyrockets. And so will the learning, because then you could have conversations about the learning and about the way they learn and how we can get them to a higher level and a new plane. Because what we want to do is think about the student in a holistic approach. You got this one kid, and we have so much data on that one kid, right? You have the biographical data, you have their characteristics, you know their strengths, you know their report cards, you have all of this data. But that kid is a sum of that data. One piece of it is not enough, right? If I know that the kid has a problem with attendance, then I know that they're going to have poor grades. If I know that kid has a learning disability, I know that they may not be on benchmark. So thinking through, what does that look like? We want to look at a kid as a holistic approach, more than one set of data, that inclusive set of data, and helping kids understand that they are more than the test that they just failed, or more than the test that they just got a straight A on. Because oftentimes they think they're going to get straight A's on everything. And then when they don't, the devastation sets in because they think they're that one data point. So we have to help kids think through the data and how they balance that out, because data should belong to everyone, not just you, not just the school or the SIS or the learning management system, but it empowers our students and our parents to help them take control of the learning. So if you have a data dashboard in your digital content, use it. Help the kids understand how to read 1, 2, 3 at the most. Don't get them too crazy, but we want them to be able to read some of the data dashboard. And it can become overwhelming, just like Google can become overwhelming because there's so many things involved, right? And having the kids track, as you can see there on the far side, having them track their data, you could do that as well. I was in a classroom, they had data notebooks. The kids were collecting data on a daily basis. They were writing down their warm-ups. They were writing down their exit tickets. They were writing 2 sentences every day about what they learned. They were tracking their data. And then they were taking ownership. They felt empowered in that classroom. So you want to think through, how can you help your students get that empowerment? And like we talked about a moment ago, conferencing in those one-on-ones, build those relationships, help them goal set, help them understand that they are more than the data points. Yes, they got a C on that test, and I know they wanted an A, but what do we need to do next? Remember, what? So what? Now what? Teach that to your kids as well. What's going on here? So what do we learn? Now, what are we going to do? So setting up some of those steps to become better in your classrooms. All right, I gotta quit talking. It's time for you guys to do some talking here. What are some data that you are asking kids to collect, or you could be asking kids to collect? So we're going to go into breakout rooms. It's the same breakout rooms that we did before. You already have those friends there for you. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll see you in about 5 minutes. Look at you guys already doing this. You could actually already get the 5 hours of professional development. This is stuff you're already doing, so it's going to be easy to move forward if you want to get those additional 5 hours professional development. All right, so you guys are already doing the what, so what, and the now what, and teaching the kids that strategy. Oh my God, would be a great place to start. So when we're thinking about using data to inform learning, there's lots of different places you can do this. Of course, the digital curriculum will give you lots of data. I love it. Exit ticket, monthly AR reports. Yeah, we want to turn that data into action, and we want to have students start tracking their own data, teaching them how to analyze that data, the what, the so what, the now what, teaching them to think about, I got this data. What do I do with it now? How do I set a goal? What is it going to do to make that goal? Having one-on-ones with your kids and helping them understand that, yeah, they are lots of different things, and being thoughtful about what data points are important to track. Because you and I know we live in a world with a gazillion amount of data. And as you heard me say earlier, use AI. Let AI help you a little bit with data. Now, In the Canvas classroom, you're going to see better classes, better lessons. I absolutely love it. You're going to see lots of different places there where teachers are using data, and they'll give you some insights in their math, English, science, social studies, all their different content areas, how they're using data and where you could be possibly using data as well. That will be in the Canvas course. So if you're interested in the Canvas course, guys, what you can do is just explore different ways of using data, and you guys are already using the data. So think about, how are you empowering your students to use the data, and thinking about how to help our students with the what, the so what, and the now what.